Under colonial rule, we faced the negation of African agency. The colonial system says we want human beings, whether they control. But now we are out of colonialism, and what we have gained from being independent is the capacity to decide. We will decide what we accept.
To make sure that these conversations are not the ones that people will say, "Oh, we arrived suddenly," to say, "How did we get here?" But to be able to bring these things up in civil society space, in media space, and make sure that governments around the world and governments in Africa and even our Nigerian government is transparent about their dealings and what they want essentially when they say, "Oh, we are in a contract with this country," or we are arriving at some form of agreement.
As a researcher who has done like substantial work in the area of foreign influence, what role or what action do you think the government can take to address some of the pressing issues that has been identified?
So I think what needs to be done is a very clear plan to ensure that there's more learning, that there's more continuous understanding, and just even work to make sure that the government is on top and in a more proactive position. Because one of the biggest issues that we've seen is when governments have to react to a myriad of issues at the same time, and that has now led to a prioritization issue that might be, either helpful or not helpful. So as long as government is in a much more proactive manner, then things can be even better addressed.
As the research and insight lead at Datafight, what are the most pressing issues you have identified through your research when it comes to issues of foreign influence, and how do these influences impact Nigeria's democracy?
Yes, several. Like you said, the pressing ones will be issues around security, defense, issues around trade, tech, and of course culture, education, media, and all of that. So even health, bordering health and all of that. And our concerns are that some of these interests that other countries or other entities have in Nigeria, some of them are not in sync with the interests of the people. While the policy makers, the government, might find these influences okay, probably they think it coincides with their own interest. The challenge for democracy is that are these things representing the interest of everyone? So that is the challenge, and those are our concerns. And we have put most of those things out in our policy briefs, in many of our article papers, and some of our investigations, several of them, and for people to see here.
How about other stakeholders, the media, civil society, and the academia? What would you recommend? What kind of action would you recommend they take from their end?
I think the main emphasis there too will be in maintaining the level of attention, right? So even when it comes to elections, we've seen media and CSOs playing a very big role in actually highlighting the challenges or highlighting the gaps in the electoral space. So I think that similarly to that particular space, what's very key is to have CSOs, academia, media organizations actively shedding the light on these challenges and the gaps so that governments can actively work on trying to manage them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just before I do make an opening remark on behalf of my Chief Executive Officer and founder, Joshua Lufeni, I would just like us to observe a moment of silence for one of our own, the civil society. Was a phenomenon when it comes to data journalism and, in fact, gender and a lot of other things. Last week, Mr. Rotimi Sapori did pass on. Many of you would, for those who have the personal relationship with him, would know he's the executive director and editor-in-chief of the African Center for Development in Journalism, and he had profound impact in the arena of civil society and also when it comes to journalism. So we thought it best that on this very occasion, that we start off by having a moment of silence, just to give respect and honor to the man who has passed on. So if you would please indulge me, we would like to be on your feet observe a moment of silence for just a few seconds. Can you please be on the screen? There's a lot of conversations around where we are, where we should be, what democracy is, turning out to be, what it was defined for us in books, what it is turning out to be, and how engagement and influx and influence and all those details are going in. Of course, Nigeria alongside with at least 16 West African countries and Africa at large, are engaging foreign actors, or they have foreign actors playing within their space, within their democracies. And it's of interest to just wonder about how this opens up. You think about those engagements. Are they some sort of engagement where you say, oh, it is completely documented? Those foreign influence engagements, are they documented? Are they undocumented as well? And if they are documented, how transparent is that documentation? Along the lines of when you think of security, when you think of mining, essentially even transportation, when you think of contracts and the likes of that. Of course, foreign influence plays a very vital role in shaping democratic values and institutions. You think about foreign influences from countries like China, for example. A lot of African countries need the much needed investment to see how they can jumpstart a good part of their democracy and the results that they dearly want. You think about the good side, you think about, what is being given in exchange, or what needs to be exchanged in order for you to have this. And does this mean democracy in this space, or in some of these countries, is not in its idealistic form that a lot of their democratic fathers and other people might have thought about? So you want to mention countries like China, you want to say United Arab Emirates, you want to mention US, Germany, Saudi Arabia. They are all significant people who are influencing democracy and, in fact, influencing the way of life. Essentially, the way of life of everyone, even in this room, if you think about it down the line. So there are solutions that one would say Africans want for themselves, or think that they should get. But the more we engage in foreign influences, the more ideas that starts to come around as regards what best works along that.
Now let's get to an important aspect. So first, there are overt influences in China or France or Russia sends the Wagner group to come and do the work for them, or Russia or China or the French government controls the dependents, whether Togo, the Republic, Cote d'Ivoire. Those are very overt interventions. But the more pernicious and effective interventions are covert through what I call narratives, ideas. All through history, ideas have been used to control. And that's what someone like Antonio Gramsci many years ago talked about. Hegemony has built around ideas. So when people ideologize you, you accept some outcomes as the proper outcome. Then they exercise control over this. That's why all disruptive work usually starts, all effective disruptive interventions start with disruption in the idea, in the normative platform. People change their perception. Today there is a growing concern about what we call decolonization. Many African scholars are saying, if you look at our ideas that sustain our practices, whether it's democracy, the argument that it's full of, it's shaped by colonial experience, and it continues to shape that experience. Today, Ambassador and others are talking about rethinking democracy to fit into our culture. But I won't go there, I have issues with some of these claims. But the key point I want to level today is that in terms of the price of democracy, in terms of what we do as NGOs, we should be able to create a filter to look at the narratives we are advancing or being advanced to us and get those narratives and find how the world is being controlled to narrative. But let me leave very broad words. First, if you look at, there's a book I would like to recommend, so I can get the chapter very well right. It's a book by two scholars, Andrea Roberts and Nicholas Lam. It's called The Six Phases of Globalization. Who wins, who loses, and why it matters. Now, the argument they put across is that narratives provides a short lens through which we perceive and communicate our understanding of reality and express our values. Political scientists and policy analysts have long recognized that narratives not only reflect and affect our understanding of our reality, but also shape our action. Now, they listed about 4 or 5 different narratives that shape globalization and the way we see it today. The first is what they call the establishment narrative. So the establishment narrative tells you that there's no other alternative to markets fundamentalism, what we call the neoliberal Washington consensus. You have to privatize, you have to deregulate, you have to remove subsidy because it's inefficient. But at the end of the day, they look at one lens. Who wins? Who loses? The corporate entities wins, the masses lose. That's one aspect of that narrative. Now, the dominant narrative has provoked reactions on the left and the right. Today, if you look at American election, you see a struggle over narratives. Economic crisis is global. How do we explain the growing poverty, the growing inequality in the world? The left-wing narrative focuses on that the 1% who are billionaires are not paying taxes. So you hear people like Sanders talk always about the billionaires are not paying taxes. Our former professor at Harvard, Elizabeth Warren, talks about they're not paying their fair share. So the left-wing narrative says that the problem is because billionaires, capitalists, have taken everything. 1%, take 90%. The right-wing narrative, so we have what we call the left-wing populist narrative, populism. You have the right-wing popular narrative, populist narrative, of course, the Trump of this world, the MAGA. And what's the argument? The argument is that the reason why things are not working is because they have destroyed our local industries through immigration, through globalizing the jobs out, and so you have the Rust Belt, you have the Michigan all collapsed. They have destroyed our culture, the white, whether it's white culture, whatever culture, nationalism. That's the same thing in other Hungary, the same issue, maybe Poland and some other part of Europe, where even in Germany, where the AfD is FBS, the alternative freedom party has won significant seats because they are saying the problem with Germany is because we have allowed immigrants and we have lost our German culture. So that's right-wing populist explanation. It's worldview clashing with worldview. So the way to perceive the influence, the foreign influence in our democracy is at 2 levels. One is a geopolitical level. Countries like China, Russia, the US, who want to probably use as proxies, these are territories that they will use to leverage and expand their political power. So today, does Niger matter to the US? Maybe not economically, but matters because of the Sahel and the threats that's in the Sahel. Matters because of the fight against terrorism. So if as, I think it's Burkina Faso or Niger, or one of them has expelled, cut off the military pact, I think it's Niger, with the US. And people are saying, bad idea for Niger. Some people are saying, good idea, and bad idea for America. So the question is, why would America care about one of the poorest countries in the world? They care because they want to have an eye on what's going on in the Sahel and terrorism. So the issue around strategic national interests, which is still masked either as idealism or some global public good fight against terrorism. But the more pervasive aspect of foreign influence is ideological. Is about shaping all of us to see the world that people want to imagine and bring about. They are following that world through strategic engagement with civil society and through governments. Now, let me make this point, maybe 2 points. The NGOs are a very dangerous platforms for disinfluence for 3 reasons. 1, with the collapse of government, public trust in government institutions, civil society groups defined broadly to include religious groups, developmental groups, activists, journalists, now have more credibility in their community for the work they're doing. And therefore, they have more capacity to change perception and belief system. So if today the civil society people begin to advocate for transgender rights, it will carry, over time, they will be more successful in changing social perception that if the Ministry of Social Welfare is, because they have more credibility. And the rise of new media and disruptive technology has shifted the balance of power from official government to non-governmental platforms. So the power of civil society to advance narratives, to change behaviors, to impact outcome is tremendous, and therefore is a very risky platform for foreign influence to control. The second reason is that the subversion of funding. Funding, right from the days, the 70s, when America started the democratization project. Somebody like Professor Kakarota went to great work on that. I mean, if you have this fund, the whole work that Open Society did in East Europe that led to the rebuilding of liberal democracy was because the Soros provided enough fund to rebuild such European university in Hungary. You have several East European, in fact, the whole civil society pro-democracy funding started from East Europe. They succeeded a lot and took out those states from Russia. Good, bad idea is subject to discussion, but the point I make is that the capacity to fund is strong leverage to change narrative and reconstruct society to fit into the idea you want. Is it a good thing if everything that the West thinks is good, we report and practice, and it's a good thing? I think that's probably why Asian countries have more sustained development. China, Japan, Korea, because they were able also to create their own platforms to push back a little bit from the advance of Western liberalism. So the fact that he who pays a piper dictates too is a danger for foreign influence. And finally, on why the society matters is that first I talked about the fact that you are more trustworthy than government. You have more powerful tools, social media. If something happens now, you can tell stories better than government can tell stories. And finally, I think we don't need to have a modern day gatekeeping on ideas, but there should be institutional filters. There should be either with the universities some kind of processes in which our universities and learning centers are designed to intercept, analyze, and demystify some dangerous ideas that we're going to get from time to time. The nature of the world, I focus a lot on development theory, and I ask myself, what is the pragmatic lesson about development we can make for the world? And the lesson is very clear. Countries that have developed must have elites who are properly informed about what's going on in the world. You can't build a national development without knowing how to leverage international development. If you want to build another economy that is strong, you should expect that there will be sabotage from competitor nations. You don't expect a country like China that wants to export goods to Nigeria, to be more concerned about the development of their own industry. They are going to be concerned about their capacity to export to you. It's for you then to know how to leverage China's abundant financial capacity to develop yourself. So it becomes a win-win. So we should stop blaming countries that take advantage, seem to take advantage of other countries. We should now start building counter-hegemonial structures to harness opportunities in the global world, to work with China, with Russia, with US, and with anybody, but with a strategic plan and with an idea to use them to achieve our own indigenously defined development agenda. If you let me draw two contrasts. When Chairman Mao died as China and then became the premier prime minister, you know what he did? He didn't go to America for talk. He didn't go to look for investors. He didn't go to Harvard or Yale or Cambridge. He brought 100 American top economists and brought Chinese economists, and they went on boat ride for 3 weeks, exchanging ideas. The world of development is a world of idea intercourse, exchange of ideas. But it shouldn't be a world of self-subordination. When some years ago, when the Governors Forum did a MOU with Kennedy School of Government, they were going to, all the governors would go to do 3 weeks courses in Harvard. I don't think back then on this day, it was a big fight between me and then Malabel fight. And I said, who needs Harvard education? That was the title. I said, look, you are going to be a governor. Sit down here, my friend. If you know you're not well educated, why didn't you leave some of us who were educated to come and take the job? Have you seen an American governor say he's doing 3 weeks course anywhere? You have staffers who are higher than Harvard people if you need them. Why should you go to Harvard to go and say you're 3 weeks in Harvard learning what? Like, I think someone look when they are as well. The point is very simple. Leadership was taken seriously. The Chinese leaders did not go anywhere. They brought those guys, sat with them, get the group. And that's why I've been saying that the best way, when I was made chairman, I refused to go on training. I said the best way is to bring training down, download training to the platform where more people will access it and access it in a learning by doing. You don't just go and waste your time saying you're learning. People go to Oxford. Let Oxford faculties come and design a training with their own experts that fits your own context. That's what's missing. And that's why foreign influence will always remain there. It's how you use it, appropriate it, process it, and it's for development. And for you to do that, you must have elites who are first confident about themselves, not primitive elites who freeze at the face of a white man, who, if they take them to a door on Berlin 3 days in a hotel, they'll come and say, wow, this is wonderful. I remember, I won't mention the Nigerian president once went to Washington. I was in that visit, the first time to State House. I made a comment. He said, this is the happiest day of my life. I'm not kidding you. It was this day. Once that happened, I remember Hubert, who used to be a Nigerian, who said, a lobbyist at Washington, called his son, there's going to be a media crisis. We called all the editors and said, I don't publish, but of course, this is a it. So the happiest day of my life. And he was being honest. Because he's a local person. That's the best officer. I've been in the White House, come to American president. So how would such leadership withstand foreign influence? So let's build better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Thank you again, sir. I think that was a very wonderful. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Prof. But you said something about the CSOs that the country's government should be funding them instead of foreign countries. Don't you think that we are running away from foreign influence to local influence? Because from what you said, he will place the tool, who will place the piper dictate the tool. The foreign influence, because of they are the ones sponsoring these CSOs, they are dictating what they should do. Now, if they should, the state government or the federal government of Nigeria should be funding them, don't you think they will be, dictating how they will run their affairs? Thank you.
I think that's a very important question. Let me clarify. Okay, first, there's nothing wrong in receiving foreign funding. The US government as well receives, US NGOs receive from Europe, receive from private, Critical Foundation, sometimes funded by American based, British based. Water, sanitation, malaria, health, gender, things that are not explicitly political. So you would say that people are providing water in rural areas, monitoring the level of sanitation, helping with health education, people will post them, or article will post them, or people will post them. So there are actually broad spectrum of NGO interventions that are not political. There are also those that deal with freedom of information, all those things. So if you provide funding that are very defined by law, who access it and how to access it, it wouldn't matter. And the people who run it are not part of PDP or APC or Labour Party. In fact, it's not even governments undermining those children. Some of them, the framing of access to those funds themselves condition you to certain practices that sometimes may be against your moral or cultural beliefs or national imperative. So this is, if I was a leader of a country, I would run a developmental state, a state that is coherently focused on development. So I'll ask myself, what do we need to help our NGOs be independent, be strong? Because NGO contribution to education is very high. The feedback from NGOs help in governance. So it's in public interest to strengthen those NGOs. So I will agree with you that it's still international funding, but the point I'm trying to bring out is that today's world of reckless political alignment, most NGOs, most institutions have now bought into political agenda. And what that means is that these funds are used to drive a world in which they want to see come. Guys, if you read what's going on in the world, there's a big fight over gender, transgender, sexuality issues. It's not a case of neutrality. People are putting their life on either of that outcome. And people are putting their money to bring the outcomes that they want.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Mine isn't a question, but just a comment based on what you just said. I entirely agree with your submission. I work with a civil society organization for long, and one of the things that we have been able to learn is there is no funds that comes without condition. And a lot of the times, most of the funds that they give us usually comes with a particular condition. For example, if I come from Maiduguri, assuming I come from Maiduguri, and a lot of the issues we face in our context is maybe in relation to insecurity, food insecurity, amongst others. Donors might decide to give us a conditional grant that dictate that we implement a project that advocate for same-sex marriage, for example, or something similar to that. And if you look at it on the other hand, civil society organization, we also as citizens of the country, we are the instruments that foreign influences can use in order to influence the democratic values of the nation. For example, like Professor mentioned, any fund that is accessed from international organization mostly comes from international development. And a lot of them, through their foreign policy, have a certain level of footprint they want to leave around the international communities in order to influence the sovereignty of those states. It might be through cultural, it might be educational, it might be financial. So this is something that civil society has to really look into. And I entirely believe that there should be a way in order for the civil society organization to know type of grant they should access in order to ensure that the project we are implementing does not cause harm unintendedly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for just one more question.
Well, thank Thank you so much, Prof. Mine is not a question, though. It's as well a comment based on what you said. Um, Based on what I picked here, I think one of the things that I've understood in us in Nigeria, mostly Africa, is that we fail to know our identity so that we can establish an influence. Because like we love to run to China, we love to run to Russia, we love to run to the US. Those are all countries that try to establish their hegemonies over the world. But we cannot develop, like we cannot start up a development plan, or we cannot start up to affirm ourselves in the global spheres by automatically trying to collaborate with countries that are trying to actually establish their dominance. So I think the main thing for me in all that you say is that we should really know our identity. Because okay, let's say we go to the World Bank and so on to get loans. Definitely, as you said it, and as we all know it, no loans. The World Bank will not give you more than 10 billion without giving you a condition that actually I think is favorable to them. So like, and it's actually a trap. That will be a trap. So for me, the major takeaway from your lecture is that it is good for us, it is essential for us to know our identity, to define our line by then, and that will actually give us more weight to work on a partnership level with other nations than to work on a submissive level with other nations, thinking that we should develop ourselves rather. But by the way, we are just doing ourselves inside and to develop ourselves. So this is the contribution I can add on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think just to sum up, I totally agree with you. And again, let's not forget, identities is evolving. We keep evolving. So what I ask is that we be authentic in. So if you used to maybe believe X and you want to move to V, let it be that you thought through it yourself and you thought, now X makes more sense to me than A I believed before. Let it not be that you are totally unaware, I don't know what they're doing, and then they swept into B and say, well, what I heard, we already hit a star this fellow for. So really, a nation is a conversation. We keep thinking about ourselves and the world we live in. And the final point is that look, you can't live ignorant of the global risk we are facing. Every day, the work we do in our private lives, in our national life, is impacted by what's going on globally. I think I will adapt my case, Keynes economist argument says, practical men presume that because they do their practical, they don't know that they are implementing the ideas of madmen long dead. So the things you think is, this is my own idea, it's actually what madmen who are already dead men is what I think. That's why if you look at all these ideas, I started by talking about Adam Smith centuries ago. So what Adam Smith says, you see today's economists doing what Adam Smith says. So don't assume that these are just ideas that I'm in charge of myself. I'm doing this project. You might be the captain of a violent idea. Thank you.
Round of applause for Professor Sam. Very, very insightful session. Thank you very much, sir.
That's powerful, profound delivery. I listened with rapt attention to that keynote address. That was very, very deep and wide. It covered almost everything that we needed to talk about. Talking about the conceptual framework of the foreign influence and the impact on our democratic values, I want to believe that the professor has had the final word. But one of the things he has said is that conversations should continue. We should continue the conversations. So I'll think of what I'm doing now as not as setting the scene has been set already, but as bridging the gap between the foundations, the theoretical framework, the conceptual analysis of this theme. So I'll be bridging that, be a bridge between that and the conversations that will be taking on after that. I believe after I leave here now, I will be having the panel discussion where most of what the professor talked about will be dealt with.
Please, one house. I know we're having an interview at the back, but one house. Alright, so now I am going to be introducing Mr. Afolabi. So please can you step up? Mr. Afolabi is a Nigerian writer, researcher, political analyst, currently working as a research analyst at the Center for Democracy and Development, CDP West Africa, focusing on elections, political security, and regional analysis in West Africa. His writing and research have been featured in publications such as Foreign Policy, World Politics Review, Stairs Business, and Premium Times, amongst others. He has been interviewed on television and cited by international publications like CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and the Financial Times on issues concerning West African democracy, particularly elections and recent coups in the region. He has presented papers at the Pan-African Scientific Research Conference and the European Conference of African Studies, providing insights and commentary as a moderator and panelist at various conferences. Another round of applause for Mr. Foriegn. Thank you so much. And then I am going to be calling on Ms. Taniola Tayo. Please, a round of applause for her. She's not feeling too well today, but she did make the sacrifice to come out. Thank you so much. So she is a sitting policy advisor with nearly a decade of experience in trade, investment, and development issues across West Africa, spanning both public and private sectors. As a fellow of the Program for African Leadership and a Chaplain Scholar, she is also affiliated with the Global Shippers Community, an initiative of the World Economic Forum, currently serving as the Executive Director of Alignment. She spearheads efforts in trade, investment, and development issues in Africa. Additionally, she holds roles as a Trade Policy Fellow at the Africa Policy Research Institute and lead Economic Intelligence and Nigeria's Office for Strategic Preparedness and Resilience. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, how are you all doing? Okay, it's still morning, so I'll be right if I say good morning. And I guess we should just jump right into the conversation. Okay, so I'll start with you, Mr. Afolabi. And now, oh God. Okay, so as a seasoned political analyst with experience in various sectors, how would you define foreign influence in the context of Nigeria's democracy? So on to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So, I think one of the most interesting elements when you're looking at foreign influence is how, in a world that is increasingly interconnected and interwoven, many of the things that we assume are just far off Nigeria's reader actually come to play a lot in our politics. If you ask Jonathan, former president, what was the biggest factor in determining his election of 2015, he won't say insecurity, he won't say corruption, he will say LGBTQ rights. And that's because earlier during his term, he had signed into law a bill that was anti-LGBTQ rights that actually set a prison sentence. And the perception in the government, especially within the cabinet, was that that simple action led to the US government under Obama being very critical and then supporting tacitly and in a way directly the Buhari campaign, which eventually led to Buhari's election in 2015. These two things seem very, very far apart, but then there's a very clear level in terms of how something happened far off in different continents actually affected Nigeria's election. And it's one of those examples of how even nowadays the interconnection is actually much more stronger than we expect. We talk about things like the Japa syndrome, migration, brain drain, and many of these different areas of osmosis between domestic policy and foreign policy. But then there are actually other areas where we can see an increasing incursion of foreign involvement in the way that Nigerian democracy is in practice. One other example that's actually quite interesting is if we look at issues around media and disinformation. So if you take a snapshot of an average social media profile in many Francophone West African states, you will see a heavy push of anti-French sentiment. This is a very strong colonial power, this, that, and then pro-Russian sentiment. Now, a lot of work that we've done in the past actually looks at the fact that we've had an incursion of bots and of targeted disinformation campaigns to try to push narratives in case of particular power and in favor of particular powers. Now it's not limited. Now it's not limited to Nigeria. There's a lot of going into the fact that the American election in 2016 had a similar form of disinformation. But then again, these are attractions where things that appear very far apart actually happen closer to home. Even if you look now across the region, when there was a second coup in Burkina Faso 2 years ago, even the coup that happened in Nigeria last year, there was that perception that France's involvement or France's perception was now very, very low, and it made sense that anybody who came into power should be anti-French. And we saw that again in the recent elections in Senegal, where the opposition candidate is somebody who had been very, very openly critical of the relationship between Senegal and France.
Continue, Senora, you have an incredible background and expertise in trade and development. So my question to you is, with your expertise in trade, security, and development, how do you perceive the intersection between foreign influences and Nigeria's democratic governance, particularly in terms of trade agreements and economic partnerships?
Thank you very much for the question. So we're speaking off the cuff, more or less, to this question, and you're asking how do trade issues intersect with foreign influence in Nigeria as far as democracy is concerned. Nigeria is a very big country in West Africa and in Africa. I mean, we are all very familiar with this fact. We are half of the population of West Africa, about half of West Africa's economy as well, and we're also the largest country in Africa. What it means is that some of the levers that external actors are able to leverage to, in some ways, influence or manipulate others are not always as applicable to us. So as one example, when it comes to trade agreements between the large players and, say, the developing world, with the EU, you have something called the EPAs, which is the Economic Partnership Agreement. But Nigeria has refused to really properly sign up to that. And because it's a large country, it can't really be bullied into doing so. And why do I mention this? Because increasingly we're seeing that some of these agreements are preferential agreements. It means that some of these richer countries grant you access to their markets at a preferential rate. So if your good is leaving maybe Togo to go to France, you won't pay the tariffs that you're supposed to pay, which will make your good cheaper, and more people want to buy your good. And we're seeing that increasingly these preferential trade agreements are used to, bully some countries to align themselves in particular ways. For example, there was a threat to South Africa from the US that we're going to lose AGOA preferences. Now, AGOA is another trade agreement between the US and some African countries because they felt that South Africa was doing something to Russia at the time. So South Africa had to start running around saying that, oh no, we didn't do that, we didn't say that, we didn't do this, because they did not want to lose AGOA access.
The problem, like Tanya mentioned, is that you can't really deal with your neighbor's backyard if you're still on campus. So it still comes back down to how best we manage those interlocking points between domestic and foreign policy. And the last question really is on the issue of mercenaries, and I think there's only one very clear point. You are right that mercenaries do deal with the interests of the countries, but most importantly, they deal with the interests of the company. And the company might not necessarily deal with the country itself. We know the Wagner example that you mentioned, they also nearly went to war with their own defense, with their own country itself. So it's one of those cases where when you now go back now to the way foreign policy is being seen and foreign influence is being seen, it's not limited now to just states. And states play in a whole different conventional way. It's the same way if you watch a movie about mafia now, right? And you're like, oh, this is the way the game is played between old gentlemen, and then you have a new captain saying, actually, I don't care, I'll just put somebody off. It's that kind of thing where non-state actors are not confined or are not bound to these conventions. They can still carry out what they want to do because their own end profit is not about maintaining relationships, it's about getting profits, getting influence, and then just growing and building how much they can. So it still comes down now to we are in a very new in terms of how foreign policy is being considered. We're in a very different dynamic to how foreign influence is being seen. And there needs to be a concerted effort to keep learning about this kind of things, right? It's a very changing dynamic, and if we don't embrace that, then we will get our goals and our goals out of it.
Right. Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much, Mr. Neil. A round of applause for them and for the panel session, and of course the stakeholders dialogue itself. We would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to everyone who has taken the lead of the program till now. And I will call on the Director of Programs, Mr. Amadi, to give parting words to the participants. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. But
this is not just one event. There's a lot of things and assignments that would carry on alongside with our partners in amplifying conversations around this, and of course, providing strong research for those who do need much more. Let me just take this moment to also remind everybody, you can always download the reports. It's there. We have it on QR. It's not just the few reports that you see today that we're sharing, but there are other reports on this kind of conversations that is available on our website. That's on dataflight.com. You'll be able to find that. And if you do scan the QR code, you actually see all the other reports that are there, and it will help you navigate quite a number of conversations around foreign influence and other things that we do work on essentially. Thank you, everybody. I think I'm told that we can have lunch now.